Hello, welcome back to Vine Chat, a nice little offshoot of Wild Wine Life. Today, we have the pleasure to sit down with Tamara Roberts, the CEO and second generation at Ridgeview Wine Estates in Great Britain or Southern England. You're over in Sussex.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you are making sparkling wine in Southern England, and I think that is so nice. Your parents started in 1995,
Absolutely. Yeah, they did. Yeah.
and I just think the whole background and everything is just so unique. Whether you like sparkling, geeky wine, all the above, or great quality, your Ridgeview Wine Estates checks off all those little things. So, Miss Tamara, thank you for joining me here at Wild Wine Life on Pine Chat.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be with you. Yeah.
So you're the second generation. Your parents started in 95. So you grew up, or at least spent part of your youth working the vineyards. You went to school, you were a finance background, became a
Mm.
lawyer, and then went back to the wine industry. And you've taken the company from 25,000 bottles a year since you took over, was it 2014?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit bigger than that. It was probably in 2014. We started off at 25,000 when we had our original vineyards, and then over till the point I took over, we were probably about 200,000 bottles, something like that. So yeah, we were getting up to that sort of level, and then kicked on from there. Yeah.
You are competing against some of the big boys across the channel now.
We are. Yeah, yes. Yeah, it's always good to pick your battles, isn't it? And probably the sort of the strongest branded sparkling wine is always the it's not necessarily your the easiest target, but it really is what where we at the level at which we compete in terms of the wines we produce in style, mainly due to climate and geology, just enables us to do that. We have quite a uniqueness of both of those in the southern part of England, which just creates that style of sparkling wine consistently year on year.
So it's a little bit warmer than the champ. I mean, I would love to go over there, but from what I understand, you're slightly warmer than maybe the Champagne region, but you have that wonderful influence of the coast. You're only 12
Yeah,
miles from the channel, right?
I think we're I would say their summers are hotter than ours,
Really?
winters colder. We're just slightly more maritime, so because of that influence of the sea, and actually in the southeast of England, we're very close to the continent. There's only a small piece of water really that separates us. In fact, we were. And that's a little bit around the geology as well, because the chalk that comes into the South Downs is that same seam of chalk and the North Downs that goes back under the channel and pops back up in Epinay. So we were all joined together at one point. So we tend to, I would say, have slightly milder winters, not so hot summers, and it has become incredibly hot in that central in the Champagne region compared to not too long ago. And I think we're all seeing, slight changes to our weather patterns, particularly over the last sort of 15 years, I would say. But it does mean that we retain a very long growing season, and so we're only just starting harvest now, for example, and Champagne would have finished probably a week or 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow, that's really neat. So what inspired your father? I mean, I've read in different history. I mean, of course, you had the Romans that had vineyards in Great Britain, and then there's different historical references where different French wine estates in Bordeaux or Burgundy complained about the competition of English wine coming into France.
Mm.
What inspired your dad to start up British wine?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. He had a business before Ridgeview, which was in IT. So he started an IT business in the early 80s, which became one of the biggest IBM resellers when they were in their pomp, really, in the 80s in the UK, and then sold out towards the end of that. And I think there were a couple of things that sort of drove Dad to look at it in more seriousness. Firstly was he spent quite a bit of time in Champagne. It was one of his favourite places, one of his favourite styles of wine. So he would, particularly with his old business, if anything that was worth celebrating, then it had to be celebrated with champagne. He even had sort of his own labelled growers champagne, things like that. He got really into his champagne. And then I think a little bit of that, and also over in the UK, there was changes to the English wine industry in the late 80s, early 90s with, it was actually an American couple who started Night Timber back in the late 80s. And they were I would say that they were the first to plant Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier with the sole intention of making traditional method sparkling wines, which, as we all know, is the Champagne method. And I think their first wines came out probably in the early 90s and to big accolades and were winning awards. And I think that those sort of two, love of champagne and, oh, look what's going on over here, then led Dad to look seriously at finding land to create a retirement project of making English sparkling wine, which soon grew way beyond that and brought the whole family back together again, which was really nice, actually, because my brother and I were off doing other things at that point. So yeah, it was a crazy but amazing thing that they did.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, did you say, Dad, you're crazy? The joke in the wine industry is if you want a small fortune in the wine business, you start with a large one.
Yeah, and it really is. I mean, it's not. I mean, we're not going to lie. There is a lot of that. You can spend absolute fortunes on the wine industry. You know, it's not all about the obviously planting, grape growing. You know, your yield really determines quite a lot of your profit margins, and in a cool climate, low yielding environment where we are now, that's obviously a bit of a challenge with the weather we have, and not knowing, and also sort of nobody really knew how to grow grapes in England, and particularly Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, because they were new varietals, they weren't widely planted, and even we were probably one of the first few to plant. We've probably got one of the oldest Chardonnay planted vineyards here on site. So in England, of course. So we've had to learn, you know, an awful lot about training, how to train the vines, what's the best way of getting the yield, you know, how many nodes do you leave for the following year to balance sort of ripeness versus quality versus yield. And it has been quite a journey. You know, putting a winery in, you know, it's not a lot of knowledge in the UK about wineries and what they need and winery weight. So it's just everything has sort of been a learning. And when you come around to, you know, and we now, you know, we've just extended wineries, things like, you now know what you're doing. But yeah, it's easy to throw a lot of money at it. If you've got that money, put it that way.
I also thought it was interesting that you have your own underground cellars that you built back in '97. Your dad really went all in trying to have his version of, okay, we're going to do it underground. We're not going to build large concrete type cellars and cover it with dirt. But
yeah.
And then your first release was 2000, and you actually won the English Wine of the Year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't know how the market's going to react when you first release your wines, and I think it's testament actually to the way that my dad approached most things. I think that's something that we do in the family. We don't cut corners. We're very focused on the quality side of what we do. So, and I think the sellers are probably a part of that investment, is making that investment because we knew longer term that would enhance quality of the product, and actually a little bit of sustainability built in there as well, because if you have underground cellars, you then don't have to you don't have to temperature control them, which again is saves on power and saves on money long term. So I think a lot of that comes from mum and dad's way of thinking and their values basically as well in the business. So yeah, winning that. And I think that's the thing. As soon as you win an award, you want to win another one, don't you? You kind of go, oh, that's good. Wonder if we can win, rather than just the national or the domestic awards, could we win an international award? And I think it's that keeps you going. You're like, oh, what's next? What's next? What's next? And it comes a bit of a shock initially, and then you start thinking, okay, we're on to something. And I think we've been really lucky. Not lucky, actually. We've had the wine journalists and just general press have really, really warmed, I think, to the English wine industry. I think it's kind of a bit of a good news story amongst quite a lot of bad news a lot of the time. So we get a huge amount of support in England from both sides of those reporting, really. So yeah, we've been very lucky.